that passed well. People vote with their pocketbook. I think that favors the GOP.
Hadley, and you already have more than 100 companies stepping up to give this money from this tax cut to the workers, whether it's AT&T, Verizon, you name it. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people who will get bonuses or feel this in some other way.
That's right. They're sharing the success. And anybody who said during the months-long debate over tax reform that this bill was only going to help the 1%, it was only going to help corporations, they've been proven wrong. They should lose a lot of credibility for that. I don't think that will happen because in politics, people believe what they want to believe. But ultimately, a strong economy never hurts for the incumbent party, and Republicans are in a much better position now having passed that package.
Chuck, this is what you do for a living, but the Democrats have really worked themselves into a corner where Nancy Pelosi is calling this tax reform Armageddon and the end of the world. And basically, anything that helps a business that employs your mama or your daddy or your cousin or your brother or sister is bad. And I do not think that that resonates with voters.
Well, let me tell you what resonates. Now, let me get all y'all set back for a minute. I'm going to try to talk as slow as I can. A big stock market don't mean you're going to win elections. Now, for all you folks back in East Texas, I'm going to say this even slower where I'm from, is that under Barack Obama, the stock market literally doubled. It doubled. And we created 11 seats in the Congress. So an inflated stock market and even the economy doing relatively good don't always ensure that you're going to have victories. The smartest thing they could do at this retreat, if they want to win midterm elections, is take his phone away from Donald Trump and somebody step on it.
But Jonas, I will argue that that was part of the problem during the Obama administration, is that they talked down the economy. There wasn't enough talk. And it's not just the stock market, Chuck. It's also an economy that is growing at a 3% rate, likely for the third quarter in a row. Jonas?
Well, I recall a lot of talking down of the economy under Obama as well. I will say, look, I don't think it's such a slam dunk for the midterms. It's going to be tight. It's already tight. It would be nice if these companies paid out these $1,000 bonuses right before the elections. That would be timed better, because I think it would remind people that trickle down actually exists, as does trickle up. And I think ultimately who's going to win, who's the better messenger of selling trickle down versus trickle up economics? I think Pelosi is not a very good salesperson, among other Democrats, of selling that, well, you know, you could have got a tax cut and you would spend money and then the companies would make money too. You don't have to give them a tax cut. And they give you some trinkets while they earn, years and years of corporate tax cuts. That's the pitch that probably that maybe a Bernie Sanders, if he was younger, could sell. I think it does show people that, oh, yeah, I got something in this. It wasn't what I was told. It wasn't all for corporate America. You know, personally, I think we needed a corporate tax structure to resemble the rest of the world, so it doesn't matter where the money's flowing. It was a requirement. But that said, it could go either way in an election, definitely.
But Gary B., so 80%, you were talking about this, 80% of Americans are going to get a tax cut with this. However, why do Democrats think that cutting taxes for corporations that keep jobs here, that bring more jobs to the country? People in this country are smart enough to know that if my employer is healthy and financially sound, that's good for me and my family.
Exactly. Well, Dagan, as we well know, the left is reflexively against big business, because what they do is they equate big business to, they think it's that guy on the Monopoly board walking around with the top hat and the cane, and they're all billionaires. And so they like to always pit us against them. In fact, it's not. It's people like Chuck out there who are going to probably get money back. And I would ask Chuck directly, would you rather, Chuck, have $1,000 in your pocket, or would you rather that $1,000 be put in the government's pocket? I think I know the answer to that, and then I think I know who Chuck would support for putting that $1,000 back in his pocket.
Chuck's always for putting some money in Chuck's pocket, because Chuck likes to go fishing. Let me be clear.
There you go.
I'll leave it. One thing I want to add, though, Hadley, which could be a headwind for the Republicans come November, is not dealing with Obamacare, because you got rid of the individual mandate in the tax reform bill. That's going to be a looming problem. Whether they can get their arms around it remains to be seen.
Exactly. And, you know, to Jonas's point, what happens right before midterm elections? Open enrollment for the Affordable Care Act exchanges happens every fall. And every fall, consumers are reminded what their health insurance premiums are going to be. And for the past several years, we've seen premium increases year over year in the double digits. And so now that Republicans have the reins of control in Congress and the White House, if they fail to address this issue in a meaningful way, and I do believe that repealing the individual mandate or eliminating that penalty associated with it, that's a big step in the right direction, but that should be the starting point for reform. It is certainly not the finish line.
John, final word to you.
Look, the Republicans got one thing done. It was the right thing they got done, but they all had both sides of Congress and they had the White House. We're electing the least worst right now coming up in the midterms. And to Chuck's point, I think people were upset about the fact they had a Clinton and a Bush in the White House since 1980, and they wanted a change. And I think they want a continued change against incumbents, but you got to pick one of the two. And right now, with the tax cut going forward, if you have an infrastructure bill, looks like the GOP will be the one that benefits from that.
Yeah, and you've got Nancy Pelosi walking around with her tax cuts equal apocalypse sign, so maybe that works for the Democrats. Thanks, guys and gal. Cashing in just over an hour from now. Liz Clayman, what do you guys have coming up?
Hi, Dagan. The media all over that Fire and Fury book that sparked the war of words between President Trump and Steve Bannon. But why aren't they all over the fire and fury taking place in our booming markets and economy? Plus, North Korea plans to talk with South Korea ahead of next month's Olympics. Making nice or a master plan to blackmail the free world before the games begin? Come hang out with us on Cashin' In. We'll see you at 11:30.
Thanks, Liz. We'll be watching. But up here first, temperatures plunging, sending your bills soaring. How this freeze could put a squeeze on your wallet.
Live from America's news headquarters in Washington, good Saturday morning to you. I'm Leland Vittert. It is a working weekend for President Trump at Camp David. He's huddling with top congressional Republicans as well as senior White House officials discussing their agenda, special focus on infrastructure. They're going to also map out their strategy to defend congressional majorities in the upcoming midterm elections. First came the snow, and now the deep freeze. As you can see, cars stuck and going nowhere. Frozen floodwaters here in Revere, Massachusetts. Arctic air is making its way across the East Coast. Wind chill warnings now up from Vermont to Virginia, with actual temperatures plunging to near zero in some places. Forecasters say you're going to have to wait until next week to warm up. Hope you're having a wonderful morning, warm and at home. I'm Leland Vittert. Now back to Bulls and Bears.
A deep freeze gripping the nation. Roads icing over. Lakes and rivers freezing over. Niagara Falls surrounded by icicles all over. And Gary B says the big freeze could end up costing you big bucks no matter where you are. How's that, Gary B?
Well, you know, it's all based on supply and demand, Dagan. And right now, the demand for everything from heating oil to natural gas to even gasoline is going up. So those prices for the short term should go up a little. But what happens is everything reverts to the mean. I was just looking in New York. Thank God I'm not there because it's cold. Even cold here in Florida. But right now, what is it? Feels like temperature is 6 degrees. By next Friday, it's going to be 40 degrees. So this temporary spike, although it's frigid out there and everyone has the heat on high, is going to fade. So maybe a week or so of high prices.
Hadley?
Oh, yeah. Weather can affect the economy in myriad ways. Here in Colorado, we haven't gotten enough snowfall for our ski mountains this year. So we're hoping to get more snow in the spring. But bottom line, storms of any kind, storms are destructive. That's bad. That means people lose their lives in some cases. But economically speaking, they have to spend more on the necessities rather than spending their money how they would choose.
Well, John, you've seen wild price spikes in natural gas. Natural gas consumption hitting record levels, although production at a record as well. But it's also like the fruit crop down in Florida. Prices on citrus fruit are going to go up.
Yeah, and we're going to see some spikes, as Gary B said. But to Gary B's point, Gary B, I'm in New York right now, and I saw 2 White Walkers of the Night King on the way to work today. The winter has come. I'm freezing. I'm from Bermuda, you guys in those warm southern states. But fortunately, that we have a very low inflation. We have a low inflation because of many things, because of the Amazon effect, because of all the natural resources from natural gas to shale oil. So we're starting from a very low base. They have $2.49 right now as the average gallon of gas. gas. So you're going to see some price spikes, but because of this low inflation environment, it's not going to be that bad. And fortunately, unless this snow lasts forever, which I don't think it will, hopefully it won't. It feels like it has already. You're not going to see it for that long.
Well, Jonas, this was certainly an energy market that was not prepared for this kind of weather. They kind of were numb, no pun intended, because the weather was so seasonably warm earlier this season.
Yes, we were gearing up for global warming. A little cold in Florida, Gary. There's frozen iguanas falling out of trees down here. It's really cold.
Yeah,
I will say, look, yes, there's going to be some serious short-term implications. The market, there's not enough supply in these areas for the increased demand. That said, there's not going to be this move like 05 back to $150 oil. There is a ton of oil that was taken off the market because of low prices by OPEC, and also our own shale production is lower than it was. That is there for any long-term move. We're not going to get $80, $90 barrel or $4 gas prices because that will kick into the market. It'll take a little while, but it's there in the reserves. Don't worry about it like last time.
Chuck, final word to you.
To Jonas, as the wildlife expert here, that lizard is not dead. You just got to warm him up and he will walk away. To Gary B's point about supply and demand, we're talking about all the negativity, but you should think about the positivity as well. Think about the Long John sales that's going up and the snow tire sales that are going up and the whiskey sales that are going up from folks who ain't going nowhere, just sitting around being cold.
How do you warm up a lizard?
No, you know what? Wait, you just missed the fact that that was a very wise economic analysis that Chuck just did.
Exactly.
That's right. Y'all should be listening to me. I know more than animals.
Sounded like a broken window fallacy a little bit.
Somebody did call the lizard threw me off, Chuck.
In their car.
Thank you, fellas, and Hadley. Cavuto on Business coming up at the bottom of the hour. Neil, what have you got?
Hey, Dagan, time to stop burning our cash on countries burning our flag. Republican Senator Rand Paul telling me we should spend it on our roads and bridges instead. We're going to debate it. And after California becomes the first sanctuary state, someone here says the federal government should sue the Golden State. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, Neil. We can't wait. But coming up here, earlier we told you about the storm outside. Now to the storm in Washington. Some saying this feud could leave the GOP base divided. But one of our guys says that the winner of this divide has already been decided. Just look at the dollars.
January 20th, Cavuto is live for 2 hours from the nation's capital. 1 year after the inauguration, Neil breaks down the president's accomplishments, agenda, and how it all impacts you. Starting January 20th, don't miss Cavuto live every Saturday on the Fox News Channel. Time's up for Sessions. After continued concerns about his leadership, Jim Jordan says it's time for the AG to step down. He makes his case on justice tonight.
As the war of words escalates between President Trump and Steve Bannon, who's going to win this fight? John says just follow the money.
This one's easy. Look, they say the pen is mightier than the sword. That's another class I'm glad I skipped when I was in college because that's wrong, especially when the figurative sword is carried by the President of the United States against a person who, a very successful business person, but who runs a website. You compare the leader of the free world against Steve Bannon. People are Machiavellian, and when they give money, they want access. You get that access when you give it to the President of the United States. I think he wins this one.
Chuck, it is follow the money. This is what you do for a living. The Mercer family, billionaires, were already distancing themselves from Steve Bannon before this book came to light.
People talk about politics. They talk about money in politics. You never want to take on the guy that's got the biggest checkbook. People talked about how Donald Trump won this because he did a lot of Facebook ads and he was out there on social media. But there was a lot of money behind him driving that. You don't want to pick a fight with somebody who's writing checks. And to John's point, Bannon may be a great strategist. Chuck Rocha may be a great strategist. But if I'm paying for things with penny rolls, you ain't never going to hear my message.
Hadley, how does this help or even help the GOP potentially?
Right. I don't think this feud between Bannon and Trump is really as much of a dividing force within the GOP as it could be a uniting force. You know, there's a lot of people within the Republican base who may not care for Steve Bannon so much. And so leaving him behind could really allow President Trump's star to rise even further. I think it could warm up relationships with congressional Republicans and people like Leader McConnell, Speaker Ryan, and allow that legislative agenda to move forward, get things passed, get things done. I don't think this feud is going to hold the GOP up or damage the party in a big way.
Well, and Gary B., the reason that Steve Bannon's star was crashing before he took pot shots at the president's children is because he got behind one of the worst candidates, Roy Moore, with his little gun down in Alabama, and he lost in a red state, which is impossible to do.
I'd poke fun, Dagan, at your Southern accent, but I think that's going to get me in trouble, so we'll move on. I think it's charming. In any event, look, I think it's simple. I think John started out with the exact right point. You know what the rich care about? They care about who has the juice. I remember back then the rich were all enamored with Mitt Romney until it looked like Mitt Romney was going to lose. Then this past election, it was Jeb Bush until he flamed out. I guarantee right now they're behind Donald Trump because he has the juice. If things start to go south for Donald Trump, watch the big money shift to the next person who might be in office. Right now, Donald Trump looks good, probably for 8 years. That's where the money is.
Well, and Jonas, many in the GOP, the establishment, starting with Mitch McConnell, are happy that Steve Bannon is flaming out because he was going to run primary contenders against all these GOP incumbents, people who really, in a general election, were not very electable. So this looks good for any establishment Republican.
I think everybody here is underestimating the Trump magic. Yes, billionaires and money seekers are going to head towards the Gary B's juice. There's no question about that. But that's not the Trump magic. He didn't win because he gets billionaires to vote for him. The average person following this story who doesn't have a lot of money and isn't trying to cling to power hears Trump say, oh, Bannon went crazy. And, you know, you look at the two of them, you're like, yeah, Trump looks like he belongs in Trump Tower. Steve Bannon in some of these pictures looks like a guy you don't want to sit next to on public transportation. And that's what's going to ice this for Trump, not the billionaires going to Trump.
John, you get the final word.
Being from the South, I think Gary B's the one that has an accent.
I would agree. I totally agree. He talks funny.
I love you all. Big group hug. Thanks, y'all. Special thanks to Hadley and Chuck for joining us, everybody. Did you make a New Year's resolution to lose weight? What about for your pet? Turns out that's a pretty huge problem. Fear not, one of our guys has a pick to help your pet get skinnier as your wallet gets fatter. Predictions, Gary B, go.
Dagan, pet obesity is on the rise, although not with my 3 dogs and cats, but I still give them prescriptions and I use Pet Meds, which is Pets, P-E-T-S, up 20% in a year.
Jonas, you're a dog whisperer.
Yeah, a thin dog whisperer. I will say until Amazon launches their pet product, this company should do fine. That could just be a few months away, though.
John, your prediction.
Roll Tide. I think Alabama wins a classic on Monday night. I can't wait to watch it. A classic stock that hasn't been winning is GE. I own it. I think it's up 20% this year.
Gary B, hold your nose.
Well, I think it's gone the way that Georgia will in that playoff, straight down.
Jonas, your prediction.
So this week we found out basically every computer chip out there has some massive flaw that could lead to all kinds of crazy hacking, including at Apple. So I will say this cyber paranoia is good for Hack, the ETF on cybersecurity stocks, up 20% in a year.
John, help me.
I need somebody to hack Jonas so I can figure out what the heck he says every week.
And feed him.
He's a cheeseburger.
Kneel now.
We don't like to see our money going to countries that burn our flag. We ought to quit sending good money after bad. And what I discussed with the president is I have an idea for using some of that money here at home. We got bridges, we've got roads that need repair. Why don't we keep that money at home and let's put it into rebuilding our infrastructure here at home?
All right, so you want to keep burning our flag over there? Republican Senator Rand Paul says, go ahead, we'll take your aid and spend it right over here. Is that right or wrong? Welcome, everybody. Glad to have you. I'm Neil Cavuto, to Charles Payne and Charlie Gasparino, Kennedy, along with Ben Stein and Adam Lashinsky. Charles, to you first. Thanks for sitting in for me, yada, 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 whatever. Now, this whole thing, it's causing a real dust-up. You know, we're questioning not only aid to Pakistan, but maybe foreign aid in general, particularly in that neck of the woods. A lot of people say the president is getting into tricky territory here. What do you think?
This is a eureka moment, right? I mean, should we fund people that hate us, that befriend our enemies, that harbor our enemies, and diss us on American soil? Yeah, we should probably consider taking
that's what we've been doing for a long time.
And put it to Americans who actually need it. I think it's a great idea whose time is long overdue. I think it's come about time.
But we've given Pakistan billions over the years,
yes,
right? And a little to show for it. So what do you think?
I'm completely with Rand Paul here. It's actually a very libertarian idea. I think we should be re-examining the foreign direct investment we have all over the world. I mean, I think we should be closing a lot of these military bases. I think we should be questioning some of the wars that we're still embroiled in and the trillions of dollars that we've sunken into the Middle East that has gotten us pretty close to nothing.
Okay, my question was really about Pakistan, and you didn't really have to go.
Pakistan is sort of the anchor holding the Middle East
understood.
quagmire together, including Afghanistan. And that's a war we've been fighting for 15 years.
Someone seems just a little sensitive, that's all.
I'm a little sensitive.
Okay,
Neil.
fine. Ben Stein, what do you make of this? This back and forth about foreign aid has always been out there. Rand Paul says, you know, a good idea to take at least some of it and start using it on people here.
I think we spend that money on foreign aid in order to help the United States of America, and I think we fight those wars on foreign soil to keep those people occupied so they're not fighting and bombing us here. I think the idea of saying we should close military bases that are used to protect the United States just makes no sense at all. We have plenty of money. We can spend it to defend ourselves, and if those bases happen to be in countries that are not particularly friendly to us, then it's all the better for us. So we have bases close to places that are potentially dangerous. So it's the idea of cutting back on military aid, cutting back on military forces overseas, just makes no sense at all. It just helps bring the enemy closer to us.
They are here.
Maybe here more.
Well, some are here.
Some are
The
here.
question is how many more would be here.
Yeah.
But how did it get to the point where it's so much money going abroad?
Well, how much is it? I looked it up. I did a quick Google. 35 billion.
No,
Right?
not more
No?
than that.
Nothing.
It depends on how you add it.
But okay, I did a quick Google. So what I'm saying is the foreign
That's
aid.
the extent of your research before the show?
You're
kidding? That's a
prepared.
lot
Hey,
of research
Take it
for
for what
him.
it's worth. I'm prepared for your show. No, I won't no, but let's be real clear. It's a drop in the bucket compared to, you know, federal expenditures for all sorts of welfare and everything else. So, and I think
Cut that too.
And here's I agree, I would, but here's the thing, and here's what you're missing. This money is essentially bribery. We do have access to certain levels of government in Pakistan. We do have access to places where we give this money, which is a drop in the bucket, and it does help us geopolitically. Make no mistake.
Well, we're not getting much out of this.
We're buying
sure?
friends in Pakistan.
Well, we don't know.
Sure?
But we
How do
don't
you
know
know?
what we're getting.
How do you
at.
know?
We don't know.
You don't know that.
We didn't do it.
Adam, what do you think? What do you think, Adam?
Well, I agree essentially with Charlie and with Ben. I think that
I am so out of
it
here.
is.
All right. Go ahead. Explain.
It is. Well, it's petulant. It's childish to just say we're not going to spend this money anymore because you're being mean to us. We have goals, and one
But
of our
harboring
goals
people who
is
kill us is more than being mean to us.
Harboring bin Laden.
I know, but
We also went up there and killed him. Did we go
we-
there and kill him?
We don't know what would happen if we didn't give them.
All right. Go ahead. Adam, I'm sorry. We're all jumping
I
on
think
you.
it
Go
would be
ahead.
very dangerous. I think it would be very dangerous for us to just say, okay, you know what? We don't like this role of being a global superpower anymore because we're just not going to do it anymore. We could. I mean, it's reasonable. We do need to spend money on things at home. That's true. But if we take this step, there's no going back easily of losing our influence that we have right now.
You know, it's just a shame. I mean, it's not being childish, Adam. It's being reasonable. It's being smart. We have people in this country who are freezing at this very moment. They have no heat at home. Okay, how about growing our economy? And by the way, it's not a drop in a bucket. $1 billion here, $1 billion there, another $1 billion here. Ben, every week you come on the show and say we should raise taxes. So how wealthy are we really if we've got to raise taxes? Yeah, so how wealthy is America if we're going to raise taxes? I mean, I just don't get the notion of this kind of money. The return on investment, a term we all understand very well on this show, just doesn't seem like we don't know.
If we are so rich, then why are we $20 trillion in debt? If we are so rich, if we have so much money, why are we borrowing money to fund our entitlements and our defense?
Kennedy, that's not from foreign aid.
Yeah, I mean, listen, let's cut off all the foreign aid.
Then if we don't have that kind of money, then we have to borrow it from the Chinese?
Kennedy.
Then we shouldn't be loaning it to everyone else in order to make friends?
Kill all the foreign aid, and guess what? The deficit won't change that much. I guarantee it.
Well, but she does.
I guarantee it.
All right, Ben, she does raise a very good point about just how far it's far. You can make the argument this is a drop in the bucket, this is a drop in the bucket. But to Charles Payne's point, so, you know, you add them up, that's a lot of drops in a bucket. And we don't do it because this is the way it's always been done, and this way we extract favors, and God knows what things would be like if we didn't do it. But is it time, and is it so outlandish for this president to step back and say, wait a minute, I'm going to redefine what it takes to have constructive foreign aid versus destructive aid?
I Isolationism has been a catastrophe for the United States every time we've tried it. It is a drop in the bucket compared to the
How
total
is
federal
trimming
budget.
$230 million from the
should raise that.
Pakistanis a step toward isolationism?
Because the Pakistanis, although they're not nice people, it's better than having them as our avowed, clear enemies.
Right.
They are
Then
at
it's
least
appeasement.
to some extent. So they
Neil,
they're
that's
making
bribery.
drive.
It is bribery. It is appeasement.
Well,
If that's all you're doing in that part of the world where people hate you.
Bribery is not a bad thing.
The problem, though, is it's not working.
I think.
Go ahead, Adam.
No, first of all, I mean, bribery is one word, hush money, influence money, walking around money, call it any of those things. The homeland has been largely secure for a very long time under this order, the way we've been doing things. Neil, I think it is a good idea to say, are we doing it correctly? I think the president, it's appropriate to say, let's look at how we're spending it. I think generally we're spending it well, and we should keep doing it.
And how do we know it's not working? Everybody says, I mean, we don't know what the alternative would be. Usually, Ben is right. Historically,
that's what I just said.
Yeah, I know. Historically, isolationism has been a horrible.
This is not isolation.
No,
Charles Payne is not saying he's not saying cut off the rest of the world.
Let me make the point. It's one thing to look on the balance sheet and say, okay, we give them this, and let's talk to them to try to get a better deal. It's another thing to say, hey, let's pull our money out of there and screw.
I don't think you listen to Charles.
Pakistan
I'm just saying that's what a lot of people say.
Pakistan has taken the money, and they've done everything they can to not help us. I mean,
you sure about that?
Oh, sure. Because
we would not still be
stuck in Afghanistan if Pakistan was our true ally.
That is absolutely 100% true.
Suppose they were our
Pakistan is the key to
one at a time.
Afghanistan. We have not figured out what we're doing in Afghanistan. That war has been going on too long. By Ben's rationale, we would also be invading Iran at this point if we wanted to have greater influence in the region.
Suppose they were our avowed enemy.
That's not going to end the war. That's like saying we should give up the war against Germany in 1943.
If we leave Afghanistan?
By the way, suppose Pakistan was our avowed enemy. They are not. I'm not saying they're great people, but
they're not at all.
I know.
All right. Well, all I know is it started with around 230, 240 million. It's up now to close to $1.9 billion. I'd still argue we have a lot further to go.
That's a drop in a bucket to Warren Buffett.
When people say that we should be building schools and bridges in this country as opposed to other countries, this is what they're talking about.
All right. And this is a good debate.
We can do both. No
okay.
reason not
we
to
can't do
raise
both.
taxes.
If we could do both, we wouldn't be $20 trillion in debt.
All right. I wish we had more time for this. Unfortunately, we do not. And I think we saved time by talking over one another, which I think is a good goal. By the way, when you sub, you should try it. Meanwhile, forget sanctuary cities. Now illegal immigrants have their first sanctuary state, and the acting ICE director ain't too happy about it.
California better hold on tight. They're about to see a lot more special agents, a lot more deportation officers in the state of California. If the politicians in California don't want to protect their communities, then ICE will.
Today on Forbes on Fox, as Iran continues cracking down on anti-government protesters, the U.S. is cracking down on Iran with new sanctions over its ballistic missile program. Is this more proof the Iran nuclear deal is not working? Plus, New York Governor Cuomo says his state is suing over the federal tax cut law. That's a new report showing Americans are fleeing high-tax states like his. So should he forget about suing and focus on cutting taxes? We'll see you at the top of the hour.
Meg.
Live from America's News headquarters in Washington, good Saturday morning to you. I'm Leland Vittert. The Trump administration providing new details on a signature campaign promise, building a wall along the southern border. The president now asking Congress for $18 billion over 10 years to expand the current wall. The plan includes more than 700 miles of new fences and replacing existing barriers. Apple is now warning customers about two hardware bugs. The tech giant confirming that devices from iPhones to iPads, even Mac computers, are all vulnerable to what's called Spectre and Meltdown. The bugs could let hackers steal sensitive information like passwords. Apple, though, says so far, no customers have been affected. It's cold outside the Northeast. Glad you're home inside and warm with us. I'm Leland Vittert. Now back to Cavuto on Business.
We got to work with the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice needs to do a couple things. Number one, they need to file charges against the sanctuary cities. Number two, they need to hold back their funding. Another thing they need to do, they need to hold these politicians personally accountable. I mean, more citizens are going to die because of these policies, and these politicians can't make these decisions and be held unaccountable for people dying. I mean, we need to hold these politicians accountable for their actions.
All right, not a very happy acting ICE director that an interview that created some buzz because he does not like what he's seeing in California, where they essentially made the entire state a sanctuary state. And he says that sends a bad signal, makes it much tougher for him to do his job and catch the bad guys who just might be illegal alien guys. Ben, what do you think?
I think that this is essentially a rebellion by the state of California. This is very much like the beginning of the Civil War, except instead of California firing on Fort Sumter, we have these legal challenges by California saying we can override the Constitution of the United States and declare ourselves as basically a sovereign country, independent of what the Constitution says about who controls immigration. I think it is very, very close to the beginning of a civil war. I hope it's not with bloodshed. I hope it's just with litigation, but it's something close to a civil war.
Adam, what do you think?
Well, no, I think this is far more of a political situation. And while the acting ICE director is 100% right in everything that he said, he's within his rights to do what he suggested he do, the administration ought to think twice about being so antagonistic to the largest, to the richest, to the most populous state in the union. This is a political conversation that needs to happen between Washington and California.
I do think it's funny that you don't think Pakistan should think twice about this in America, but California should think twice about this in the federal government. But having said that, you know, I'm generally a states' rights person, but I think there are things like the civil rights issues in the 1960s where the federal government has to step in. And this is enough of an issue where people's safety, economics, and all these other things play such a role that I just think it's wrong. I think it's
but what specifically is wrong?
The sanctuary cities and the economic strain, even if no matter how rich California is, and also the safety issues, I think override the states' rights that they presume to have here.
All right, so Charlie Gasparino, then the acting ICE director wants to follow
scary guy.
Oh yeah, you don't want to mess with. You do not want to mess with him.
There's a few people on Fox I would not mess with.
He's a take no prisoners. But now he comes in. He wants to get into California city or town where they're harboring a fugitive. He suspects it's an illegal alien. All of a sudden, that opens up a Pandora's box. He'd like to sue. He'd like to take action, but he can't right now because the state is protecting those illegals. It's a real,
Listen, I think
legal
Charles,
limbo.
I think Charles has it right, and it's a subject we've talked about in the show in the past. There are certain things that the federal government is supposed to do. Protecting our borders and keeping criminals out of the country is one of them. And for a state to sort of disavow that right is akin to George. We're going to get a ton of nasty comments, Media Matters, but it's almost like George Wallace standing in front of the door of the school.
Exactly. So you would liken it to something, and that's kind of what you liken it to, right? Yeah. Kennedy, what do you think of that?
I think I agree with Adam in that this is so incredibly politicized that it's no longer about practical policy or rational
But does
thinking.
the state have a legal right to protect illegals?
The federal government has to craft its own immigration policy. I think our federal government has failed. I think both parties have failed.
All right, so the state has taken over that responsibility, and the federal government wants to crack down on that.
Yeah, there's so much confusion that the federal government has allowed states to politically profit off of that, and that's exactly what they're doing. The federal government has to get together, and they have to say, this is our rule book, these are the rules, this is what's happening from now on. They haven't been good at doing that.
Let's
so
say
people like
the
Jerry
National
Brown,
Guard,
Rahm Emanuel.
but let's say it's a National Guard, like it was during the racial riots, comes into, I don't know, San Francisco, and you have a standoff.
Arrest Jerry Brown. Arrest Jerry Brown.
There's that possibility. Charles Payne, right?
I would hope that they would maybe work this up to the Supreme Court somewhere and get it adjudicated that way.
Or you withhold aid or something. But Ben's a lawyer. Ben, explain it. Does a state have a right to impose?
Of course not.
I mean, it's like insurance, isn't it?
Of course not. It's under the Constitution. Yeah. This is clearly a federal responsibility, and I don't think that Mr. Holman, that extremely scary-looking man, would be out and going up to Sacramento and arresting Jerry Brown and putting him in leg irons.
I'd like to see that for a very different reason.
Well, look at that. All right, we'll see. In the meantime, President Trump is taking on Kim Jong-un over Twitter, and now mainstream media is taking the president on going so far as to question the guy's sanity. And don't even get me started on the nuclear button thing after this.
January 20th, Caputo is live for 2 hours from the nation's capital. 1 year after the inauguration, Neil breaks down the president's accomplishments, agenda, and how it all impacts you. Starting January 20th, don't miss Caputo live every Saturday on the Fox News Channel. social.
Trump needs to be medicated and hospitalized at this point, or he is going to just kill all of us.
This is dangerous. This is childish. This is unpresidential. It's not befitting the leader of the free world.
He is not merely being cavalier with a threat about nuclear war. He's being cavalier in a way that makes him seem demented.
And we were not talking about Gasparino. Critics, had to say that, buddy. Critics going nuclear over the president's nuclear button tweet, but suggesting he be hospitalized. Kennedy, come on.
No, Joy Behar is just trying to get a little bit of attention. Bless her heart. Oh, sweetness. She's really just trying to break through the static. And, you know, she's done it because we're talking about her. But that has, with the help of this Michael Wolff book, become the new narrative that the president is so mentally incapacitated that he has to be removed from office.
Ben?
Shockingly irresponsible, slanderous, insane on the part of the people calling him that. The idea of the women on The View calling Donald Trump insane is just so crazy. I can't even stand it. Trump is a wacky guy. He's a strange, funny guy. But the idea of calling him insane just doesn't make any sense. This is a man who's been wildly successful in business and in politics. The idea of thinking that he's mentally incapacitated is just it makes no sense at all.
Adam, I think what prompted it is the nuclear button comment, which just seemed to say it's one thing for the leader of North Korea to talk that way, another thing for our president to talk that way. You say?
I totally agree with that. I think people who are not psychiatrists should stay away from making psychiatric pronouncements, but I think our president should behave in a far more dignified
By the way,
presidential
I don't think psychiatrists
really
should do it either without visiting the said patient. That's
correct.
Right?
That's 100%
absolutely right. Absolutely right.
All right.
Very brilliant.
No psychiatrist.
All right, market's going higher, but the stocks to help you hit even newer highs. Charles.
Salesforce.com, an amazing company, think goes significantly higher.
Adam, what do you think of that?
Oh, it's a company I've covered, and it's very expensive, so be careful.
What are you doing?
Careful with that. IGF, it's an infrastructure fund. This is all upside. If the administration and Congress can do anything on infrastructure, these stocks will stand to benefit.
All right, Ben?
Well, I like the spiders, as always. One of the things I never talk about on this about the spiders is you don't ever have to worry about when to sell them. You just keep them forever. Whereas with the picks that my friends here have, you have to know when to sell them. With mine, you don't ever know when to sell them because you never sell them.
Now, if you just bought a spider now at these levels, would you worry that, you could be buying something kind of high here?
Yes, I would be worried that it will go down. I expect it to go down. But I think over long periods of time, you've got some very young people on the show, much younger than I am. Over their lifetimes, it will go up a great deal.
But what's long-term to you?
Long-term to me is till dinner time. But,
all right.
I wouldn't buy a ripe banana.
All right, I asked. Guys, Happy New Year to all of you. Thank you very much. All right, David Asen continues. Our Cost of Freedom block. You are watching the Place for Business. You are watching Fox.
Iranian hardliners still cracking down on anti-government protests while holding more rallies of their own. Now, the Trump administration says all of this is proving that Obama's Iran deal was deeply flawed. So should we kill the deal to help the protesters? Hi, everybody. I'm David Asen. Welcome to Forbes on Fox. Let's go in focus to find out more with Steve Forbes, Rich Karlgaard, Elizabeth McDonald, Sabrina Schaefer, John Tamny, and Capri Cafaro. So, Steve, next Friday is the deadline to certify or decertify Iranian compliance with the nuke deal. Should we decertify Iran and kill the deal?
Yes, David, it's a bad deal with an evil regime that's the biggest source of terrorism in the world. They've suppressed their own people. They're financing Hezbollah, which is killing thousands of people in the Middle East. You had that scandal Politico revealed a few weeks ago about how the Obama administration quashed an investigation and suppression of Hezbollah's drug deals. So it's a rotten regime, pressing its own people, spreading terror. Yes, get rid of the regime, and this is a good way to do it.
Well, John Tamny, President Trump says the Iran deal empowered the government and didn't empower at all the Iranian people, and that's apparently what the Iranian people are now saying. Let me just put up on the screen Donald Trump's tweet of earlier this week on this. He said, the people of Iran finally acting against the brutal and corrupt Iranian regime. All of the money that President Obama so foolishly gave them went into terrorism and into their pockets. The people have little food, big inflation, and no human rights. The U.S. is watching. What do you think?
Well, I don't think the protests have anything to do with the Iran deal. My problem with the Iran deal is that it elevates a regime that's not legitimate. Every time Democrats and Republicans make a big story out of Iran, they empower really bad people. And so to me, the answer is to not to enter into deals that are going to be broken in the first place, but to ignore that which is illegitimate. That is what will drive them from power, not deals that aren't worth the paper they're printed on.
But, Emac, the point is that the deal gave them so much money which they have used to expand their sphere of influence. You look at a map of the Middle East, they are in all kinds of places, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen. The protesters want them out. That's what they were chanting. They said death to Hezbollah, no to Syria, no to Yemen. The protesters want them out, and so do we.
Yeah, and the courage and bravery of and the heroism of the protesters, it's truly breathtaking and stunning. And you're right, the protesters are pointing out in Iran the sphere of influence that this corrupt, brutal regime has around the world. And I'll tell you something, David, when you oppress half of your economy, meaning women, you're going to be in the Stone Ages. That's what's happening. And